Thanks so much for your company. I am Pius Kojo-Baka. Straight to our very first story. A consortium of banks today moved to seize assets of produce buying company, including its headquarters at Jowulu. Now, this was after it secured a court order over non-payment of debts of over 300 million Ghana cedis. My colleague James Ishan was at the headquarters of the produce buying company and has filed this report.
We are here at the Produce Buying Company Limited, and what is happening here is an order of execution having some bailiff attached to some properties here at the premises of the company. And basically this is in line with the Produce Buying Company Limited owing an amount to the tune of 295 million Ghana cedis, and this happens to do with some banks, which of course this company is actually owing them. Let me quickly run you through the name of these banks. The Produce Buying Company is actually owing this amount. So on the list we have Agricultural Development Bank, we have the Bank of Africa, also Cow Bank, GCB Bank, Universal Merchant Bank, as well as the United Bank of Africa. These 6 banks have formed a consortium and want their money. I understand they've engaged reps from the Produce Buying Company Limited for some time now, but it appears they've not really gotten the exact result or a proper timeline on when they're supposed to get their money. We're trying as much as possible to speak to the managing director of the Produce Buying Company.
How would you know that it's someone's private car when they've not brought any document to show that it's someone's private car? So let's attach it, and then they bring the document to show that it's someone's private car.
What's happening behind me is a towing car there, which of course is here to tow about 4 cars belonging to the Produce and Buying Company here at their premises. We've been trying to engage a rep or possibly the managing director for the company, but it seems they are not willing to have any sort of conversations we've had. This is basically in line with the fact that this particular company owed them an amount that is over 300 million Ghana cedis. This is one of the many actions that will be taking place here at the premises of the Produce and Buying Company Limited. We understand that this actually started somewhere on the 9th of October 2023, which of course the plaintiffs actually decided to, file this application. And if this is being done today, and after 3 months or possibly some months, and they are not getting better response, or these consortium of banks are not getting better response from the Produce and Buying Company Limited, according to the bailiff here, they would have with no option than to auction this building that we see here, that is the Produce and Buying Company Limited premises. So that is the situation we're having here at the Produce and Buying Company Limited.
My colleague James Ishan filed that report. Meanwhile, we understand that the company, since last year, has been struggling to secure funds for the purchase of cocoa beans. Now, sources say this was due to Produce Buying Company's current debt position, which made it difficult to carry out any financial transaction through the commercial banks. Well, Joy Business understands that the PBC accounts with some of the banks have also been frozen due to this challenge, making it difficult for the company to undertake some financial transactions through the commercial banks. Now, we also understand that the salaries of staff have also not been paid for some time now due to this challenge. And of course, we shall visit the story in our bulletin, in the course of the bulletin, as we engage Professor Lord Mensah. But before then, IMF has revealed that Ghana still remains in debt distress with status classified as unsustainable. This was contained in the IMF staff report issued to its executive board for Ghana's program review. George Biafe has the rest of the story.
It was the expectation of most analysts that completion of the domestic debt exchange program that would have impacted positively on Ghana's debt position. But it appears the IMF still sees Ghana's debt situation as worrying, describing it as unsustainable. The development has sent some worrying signals to the market, with some arguing that Ghana may have to do more when it comes to restructuring its debts. The warning is coming at a time that government is working to restructure about $13 billion Eurobond debt. It closed negotiations with commercial creditors in London this week. However, one is not sure about the outcome of this meeting. The report was based on development for last year, but some are not sure about whether the situation has improved based on some of the corrective measures the government has introduced. The IMF staff report says Ghana's debt situation was compounded by the COVID-19 situation. But for many, the biggest question here is that could Ghana be forced to undertake another debt restructuring to fast-track the process to bring its debts to sustainable levels?
All right, so let's get on to Zoom and speak to financial economist Professor Lord Mensah on these running issues we are following up for you. Now, first off, Professor Mensah, thanks so much for joining me here on Business Live. Let's first start with Ghana still being classified as a debt-distressed country. Are you surprised or worried?
Yeah, good evening. I'm not surprised at all because we seem to be doing more of a PR work than, getting on the job itself. The reason why I'm saying this is that we're jumping and we're happy when we got the bilateral, debt agreement. But then if you break down our external debt, you get to know that the commercial debt carries the bigger chunk of the entire external debt. So if you have negotiated 4.3% of your external debt, whilst you still have about 2%, to be negotiated with, which at the end of the day, we see more difficulty because of the stature of the, what we call it, the commercial bonds, which the Eurobond carries, larger part of it. I mean, it is something that everybody will say we're not out of the woods yet. IMF, I would say that they've been a bit diplomatic with us. They've been considerate because if you want a country to get into a sustainable path, before you start releasing, funds to them, I don't think Ghana has done much in terms of debt sustainability. The reason being that if you take the domestic debt, fine, we've been able to control that. But the external debt, we still have more time to go. And my question that I will pose to IMF is that the subsequent release, is it going to be hinged on, how we come out of this debt restructuring? And then also, if you look at the budget that was read for this year, we have made full provision for debt payment. And, because last year we made around 53 point something billion for our debt payment. And this year we have made around 55 billion. That tells you that indeed we have made room for debt payment. And that shows that we are still have the tendency of paying our debt, larger chunk of it. Government has been rolling out treasury bills upon treasury bills every now and then. And each point in time, government goes on the market. It's like they are issuing a treasury bill to come and offset existing treasury bills that are maturing. And so that cycle of debt build-up keeps on coming and keeps on showing its head. And so I'm not surprised to see the report giving us the signal that we've not restructured our debt yet. But I think IMF has thought of the cost involved in allowing the country to go more deeper in terms of difficulty before they come to rescue. And probably that is why they've been considerate in releasing these funds to us. Because if you look at the second tranche, it was tied to external debt renegotiations without being specific on a bilateral debt. By immediately we got the bilateral debt MOU, they released the 600 million to us. But then that bilateral debt is just 4.3% of our external debt. The bigger elephant is the Eurobond. And that one, we are still in the negotiation process. And so I would say that, yes, of course, IMF, as usual, they are being diplomatic and sometimes to depose, one way or the other conflicting statement. Because, the last time I heard from the pressure that they had recently, including the finance minister and then the Bank of Ghana governor, they gave the signal that, yes, indeed, the economy has shown some growth. And then we are enjoying some exchange rate stability. And as a result of that, inflation is coming down and all those. and which is giving us some hope. But then how then do you write in your report that, we've not gone out of the debt distress yet? I mean, our debt is not being on sustainable path. It's quite conflicting because a country is negotiating on its external debt, and there's a headway that has brought up, what we call it, stability in exchange rate. Then why then do you come and say that we are, we are not out of the woods yet? But then also let's look at, the stability that we enjoy. And I always pinpoint it. They know very well that that stability is not sustainable, because immediately we resume our debt payment, that is when we get to know the exact, full scale of how the economy will look like. But for now, once we are on debt suspension, which is external debt, and that has much influence on exchange rate, we cannot say that stability is sustainable. They know it. That's why they've indicated it in the report.
Interesting it is. I don't know whether you also find that as interesting as well, because we were expecting that the completion of the domestic debt exchange program would have an impact positively on Ghana's position. I don't know what you make of that.
Yeah, I mentioned it some time ago. I mentioned that the domestic debt exchange and then the expected, OCC debt agreement has never had impact on our budget. And clearly, if you look at the budget, what we made provision for when it comes to interest and principal payment last year, we've just increased it about 2 billion this year. That tells you that we've made provision for, interest payment and interest and principal payment. And as a result of that, we can comfortably say that, yes, indeed, those domestic debt exchange never made impact, on our economy. Let me put it that way.
And could Ghana be asked again to embark on another round of debt restructuring to bring down our debt situation, or basically sustain the levels?
Hold on, please. Can you repeat the question for me?
I'm asking that, do you think that Ghana would be asked to embark on another debt restructuring to help bring our debt situation to sustainable levels?
Well, that could be possible, because we need to have a fiscal relief. Without that fiscal relief, whatever we are trying to do will be a cosmetic economic management. It will not be a true economic management, because, the government is trying to do something, which for me, I see it to be a bit fishy, in a sense that, instead of paying your debt, you've made provision for your debt. At the end of the day, you've negotiated for your debt. The provision you've made in the budget, where are you going to divert those monies to? Those are the questions we need to ask, the government. And that would be a wrong thing to do, because if you owe and you try to forcefully grow your economy through infrastructure and other things, you will end up, coming to the ground level. You either go and negotiate your debt to a true level where you can manage the payment, and then also you grow your infrastructure alongside, or you don't, you go for what we call debt suspension kind of agreement, and possibly we call for debt repudiation, and as a result of that, we declare that we cannot pay, and maybe we'll be forgiven, and then we see how we can manage the way forward. But I can tell you that, look, we try to force ourselves to grow, but we cannot grow, at the expense of not servicing our debt. No, we can do that.
All right, let's move away from this topic and touch on other developing story we are following up for listeners or viewers, I should say, which has to do with the produce buying company. For you, what will be the way out for this situation, basically?
Yeah, of course, it's a liability situation. When you look at the, the asset liability of the produce company, I think they've taken more liabilities than, they can swallow. And I'm surprised at that. And when I got to know the news, I jumped into the shareholdings of produce, company. And you get to know that government of Ghana owns the largest share, about 40%. And, that tells you that, yes, things are not going on in the country. It tells you that the mismanagement is clear on us, to the extent of cars being towed from site here and there. And you see, we cannot hide this economic mismanagement. Let me be truthful for you. We cannot hide it, in a sense that it has affected most of the SOEs. And at the end of the day, we will wait until to a point where, companies cannot even get money to buy tires, where drivers will sacrifice their money to buy second-hand tires before we get to know that the economy has gotten to a level or not. So from where I sit, I think it has to do with economic mismanagement. Cocoa body service gone, and that has transmitted into PBC, and I'm not surprised. But I mean, for you to run a cocoa agency, which the beans is always on the market. I don't think there's a point where we've sent our beans out there that we don't have market for it. In fact, we even go for loans in advance before we send the beans. So at what point, do we have to run all this difficulty, when it gets to cocoa buying, companies?
Either way, Professor Mensah, we've got to make a way out. Will you support a budget bailout for the company or rather restructuring of the business?
Well, I think we don't need a budget bailout. As far as the same management is in place, budget bailout will not change anything. We have to, make sure we privatize it. And then, the private man will inject some money. Other than that, it will be government money being recycled here and there. And that is not a way to come out from economic quagmire.
In a minute, does this also paint a worrying picture for the entire cocoa sector, and how can it be addressed going forward?
Oh, it does. Cocoa board is struggling. And if cocoa board, who can go for international loans to a point where they were even attracting lower interest than the government, raising money from the Eurobond market has deteriorated to this level, then I don't think any ancillary company that has something to do with cocoa board will survive in that manner.
Professor Mensah, we are indeed grateful for your time here on Business Live. He is a financial economist speaking to us on the subject matter. You're still watching Business Live with me, Pius Kojo Baka. More after this break. Welcome back to Business Live. Onion traders at the Ajin Kotoku market here in Accra are lamenting the low patronage of their items despite some reduction in the prices of onions. On today's edition of the Joy Business Shopping List, my colleague Jesse Ariamagbapo visits the Ajin Kotoku market to gauge the prices of onions.
And welcome to another edition of the Joy Business Shopping List. Today we'll put the spotlight on the onion industry. Now, onions form an integral part of our everyday meals. According to the Ghana Onion Industry Outlook, Ghana is expected to consume about 250,000 metric tons of onion by 2026. But just how much do you and I have to pay to acquire these onions? Today we are at the Ajin Kotoku market to find out the cost of buying onions.
I say the onion the above from kakra and this a first no. But I say dear, Yantoa Ukra Mefa said it is scanning 8 million, Ubenya Biato, Ukra 1,000, Ubenya Biato. But they say I got about 2 weeks in the Magafa way. Yanto Jonaya Basa. Yantoa de se sia metie kura o mamiska kura maji yantoa de go ne ne yeto 2 million it is scan 2 million but na de akofam ka kentia 15 na de ma bobo no so 10 cedi o ba kura 50 memo obi 100 memo obi de opa bia memo obi ato but nipa ne ma Kotoku market aye din nipa ne ma nti yesre wom aya no wom bra ene no man na akofam kakranti womomra wommeto ade mfamaye wo ba bibia wo ha banche mole wo ho eblo wo ho meko e wo ho de yam de yam ina ebi wo ho ba bibia obenya de pepe na wo de akọ
nko force complain says si a uko other places are jenenu ni boye din sa ahane na womo de gende ne ba nta ha de enye ti say far away no chire no aha de wo ba anytime bia obenya jene bia de ato Sunday if Monday kapim Sunday de bia obebe bia obenya jene ato but nkofo ne ma ekwan ne so nye Kotoku kwan ne nye nti yesre nana yesre MP enwo mo mboaye na ekwan no nye ye maye na obi fi ba bi ba wababoto no mana de wo de amaye
First, I didn't boy a dimpa by Cecia de Yamiadum, a yakakra. Yabronia Nimuna, a botono, or more de my 1,500, 1,400, 1,300. Into Saturn, ye shenny say, and I shenny To say ebia obi ba obebo no 300 onya 25 ana waje now satam na we so half no na na ye no 25 by say ade na no kurampo we say me fa boto no 900 nti we na nkai wo say me 700 but ende no omo ase ateso aha nti e ma say ande no ye di we ni je 15 ye je 15 we nya akase ne ye 15 na we no 100 na ya hye ne ende me nya boto no 6 million minyana 600 nti me shewe ni 100 na me shewe 15 se na ebe ya aboto ba ko menye we mienu a 15 na menya 300 na nketwa na aka na maton 100 na de nketinketi na eda ho ni de ye hye ne 70 se na ebe ya me so menya rubber scan de kakra medi wu se sia de ya nde ya ye kai de eye kakra mo ate ba jeni ne wo mu difference too ye wo galami na ye wo Nigeria say ye tongalami 8 million ye beto Nigeria 7 million na 6 million Nigeria na ye na ne bo wo fom esingalami no enti se obi bana se wo ko bisa Nigeria bo na we ma no mo say 1.2 na wo ba me ho na me say 1.5 a e bia na wo nim difference ni ntira galami ne bo ye din esin Nigeria no na ye white no Nigeria na ye kokko no nti Nigeria ne bonko na je galami ne bonko nti obi bana o say 15 say okobisa wa kokko no wa ha na ye say 12 na wo ba na o say 15 onim say ono ma bo aye din ama enye sa ne bo no botomu no e difference obi wa ha onim say gende bia e gende ba e wo mu difference white no wo mo say e de esin kokko no so ano ye ya esin white no wan wo piade a wo be ye gene mana tirimu pa e kokko no ba wo piade a e different from dia e white no sanity
tia no monya no fufufu like e ba bebre na an shorty
ye bi wo last week nyina be pem da die e bi wo ho one thing say e bi a betimi aba say next week na e bi nsan ma se cars ni ma bebre a e ya na ho ye din ba se cars no toa so ba bebre a e ma gende no e ba fom.
So those were some traders here at the Ajin Kotoku market sharing with us the cost of acquiring onions. So if you are looking to buy onions for your everyday meals, this is a good place to get them. For Joy Business, Jesse Era Magbako.
No chats on some other stories. The Industrial and Commercial Workers Union ICU Ghana has described the tax on electricity consumption being introduced by government as one of the nuisance taxes. The ICU leadership at a media briefing called for the withdrawal of the tax, saying nobody should blame labor unions if leaders of government fails to heed the call to abandon the electricity consumption tax. Morgan Ayawini is the General Secretary of ICU Ghana.
To reiterate the organized labor position, which we are part, that we are not going to sit aloof. We are not jokers, and we mean business. After 31st January, if nothing is done about it, with regard to our demand for withdrawal of the directive to these two organizations, electricity and NETCO, we will advise ourselves appropriately. We have started consulting our structures nationwide. And come 31st January 2024, we shall join hands with our colleagues in organized labor to do what is appropriate.
Well, the chairman of the McDonald Group of Companies, Dr. Daniel Macaulay, has urged African businesses to venture into the shipping and logistics sector to facilitate trade across the continent. According to him, the continent's potential to generate about $3.4 trillion annually is an opportunity African businesses should capitalize on. He spoke on the sidelines of the Africa and Prosperity Dialogue held at PBC in the Eastern region.
Till today, that sector had been dominated by foreigners. We don't have a single African shipping line. We don't have a single African cargo line. As I keep saying, this is our time, and this is the time for the businesses in the sub-region to also take advantage, to take a step forward, to take ownership of this continental free trade. We cannot not sit back and expect it to materialize by itself. If not, the same foreigners will come into our space. There's a lot of money in Africa to be made. We are talking about $3.4 trillion to be made in every 12 months. How do we partake in this business across the continent?
And that's it for Business Life for today. I am Pius Kojo Baka. For more stories, do log on to myjoyonline.com/business. There you have it. ADB and 5 others obtain authorization to sell assets of PBC Limited, including its head office. We brought you that story here on Business Life. That's our part company. I am Pius Kojo Baka. See you next week.